Hey y'all, it's Lacey, and I'm here to finally do my November wrap up, even though December is pretty much half over. I didn't know if I was ever going to find the time to sit down and do this, but I finally did. So, in the month of November, this was my second month participating in the Book Democracy, the Facebook group, their book bingo, book tacto event that they do, where you get assigned a bingo or a tic tac toe type card with different prompts on it. So this month I opted to go for a book tacto card, which is smaller. It's like 9 prompts. And I actually was able to get a blackout, which was fun. The prompts on my card were author name starts with A, adoption related, involving friends, makes you grateful. Then you have your free space, flashbacks or 2 time periods, bird on the cover, repeated word in the title, and food related. So and I listened to 5 audiobooks and read 5 physical books and no DNFs. So the first book that I actually finished in November wasn't part of the wasn't on my bingo card or tic-tac-toe card because I was already reading it when November started, and that was The Duchess by Jude Deveraux. This was a reread for me, and it's one of my favorites. It follows a girl named Claire. It's set in like late 1800s. She's an American heiress, but in order to inherit the money that was left to her by her grandfather, she has to marry someone that her parents approve of. And they've already gone through their inheritance. So they're depending on her to marry somebody so they can get, the money as well. So she's tasked with trying to find the perfect man to marry and fall in love with, and just have this happy ending life with. So they've come to England, and she catches the eye of a duke named Harry, and there's an insta love on her part, but he sees her as a way of like kind of taking care of all of the things that like his family's kind of fallen on hard times, but they're still living as if they haven't. So he needs her money, and he woos her, and they decide to get married. And so she travels to Scotland with him to his family estate, and she plans on marrying him. And while she's there, she meets this mysterious man who is staying in the castle. And nobody knows he's there. He's sick, so he's just come there to rest. And she doesn't know how he's related to the family, but they kind of create this kind of a friendship, but all they do is like bicker with each other. And eventually you find out how he's related to the family, and it's a romance, so you kind of know where it's going. She ends up falling in love with him and not the man she's supposed to be in love with, but she's worried because she doesn't know that if he is someone her parents will approve of. So anyway, again, it's a romance. You know what's going to happen. And I gave it 4 stars. I've always given it 4 stars. So, all right, the next one that I finished was I did it for my free space on my book tacto card, and it was Spider's Web, a Glenmore Park mystery, #1 by Mike Omer. This was a detective police book. It follows 2 detectives and this police department as they're trying to search for a serial killer who is murdering women, and right before he murders them, he sends them a message with a picture of the murder weapon that he's going to use. And then it goes through the whole procedure of them trying to track down this serial killer. I mean, it was a solid book. I liked it. It was the first in a series. I'm not sure that I liked it enough that I will continue with the series. But it had likable characters. The writing was good, but the ending fell a little bit flat. and I ended up giving that 3 stars. The next one was Passion on Park Avenue, the Central Park Pact, #1. It's another first book in a series. I used this for repeated word and title. And this follows a woman named Naomi. She is like the CEO of this company that she's created, and it's worth all this money. And she was involved with a man who has recently died. And at his funeral, she meets 2 other women, one of them being her boyfriend's wife, and the other one being another girlfriend. And none of them knew about each other. So they kind of developed this friendship and agreed to help each other avoid having disastrous relationships in the future. And this book follows Naomi. She is now rich, but she grew up very poor. Her mother was a housekeeper, and she was a housekeeper for this particular family who lived on Park Avenue, I guess. And something happens and her mother loses her job, and she wants to kind of show this family that she's made something of herself. She doesn't want them to remember her as like just the poor girl that used to be the housekeeper's daughter. So she's had this like grudge against them all these years, and she's finally in a position that she can, kind of throw it in their face. So she ends up living in the building that her mother used to work in, and becoming involved with the son of the family. And but then, due to present circumstances, she starts to realize that maybe they weren't as bad as she thought, or the son that she hated wasn't as bad as she thought, and that holding this grudge all these years maybe isn't worth it anymore. And then there's a romance that develops and all this. And then I think the other 2 books follow the other 2 women on their search for love as well. I really liked this book, and I think I will check out the other 2 books in the series at some point, because they were fun. They were like, your typical like contemporary chick lit type book. Kind of gave you like the Sex and the City vibes with the girls and the friendship, and it's very fashionable. There was lots of like fashion names dropped, and they just live this rich life in New York City. And so yeah, it was fun. The next book that I finished was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This is the 2nd book in the Harry Potter series. I used this for the prompt with Bird on the cover. This was a reread for me. And I don't know that I really need to tell you what Harry Potter is about, because I think most people know, even if you haven't read the books. But this is the 2nd one. It follows Harry in his 2nd year, and the Chamber of Secrets has been opened, and they, of course, go on their little adventure to try and find out who the heir of Slytherin is, and how the chamber is opened, and what's in the chamber, and all that fun stuff. And Harry Potter's always a 5-star for me. The next one that I finished was a graphic novel, and it was Drama by Raina Telgemeier. I was going to use this for one of my prompts, but you can't use graphic novels as a book unless you're a certain level of member in the group, and I forgot about that. So anyway, this was just a bonus read for me. I did not like this that much. I gave it 2 stars. It follows a girl who, Callie, who is involved in her theater group at school, and they're putting on a production, and she's just involved in like the drama club aspect of it, and then there's like all the drama of middle school as well. It's mostly about her having a crush on one boy, and then she develops a crush on another boy, and it was too much middle school drama for me. And I mean, there was the lesson at the end where you don't need a boy's attention to have self-worth kind of thing, but overall I thought the message leading up to it was not very good. Okay. The next one that I finished was Final Girls by Riley Sager. This was another audiobook. I used this for the flashbacks or 2 time periods prompt. I am not a fan of Riley Sager. This is the second book of his that I've read and have found both of them lacking, in my opinion. I do not like his female characters. I don't think he can write them very well. They come off very one-dimensional and whiny, in my opinion, and just don't have much of a personality. This one followed a girl named Quincy who, in college, she was on a trip with her friends. They were at a cabin, and all of them are murdered except for her. She's the only survivor. So she becomes known as a final girl, the sole survivor of a horrible crime. I did not like it. I found Quincy to just be very, very bland. And if I had to hear her say final girls one more time, like, we get it, you're a final girl, let's move on. Like, we get it. And the build-up was kind of boring. The ending was, you got that it was kind of supposed to be shocking and twisted, but I didn't really get that. It was just, it kind of fell flat for me. So I don't think I'm going to be looking at, reading any more of his books. The next one that I finished was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. This I used for the prompt of Makes You Grateful. This is set in a future where books are banned. No one is allowed to own or read books anymore. And it follows a man named Guy who is a fireman. And the fireman's job in this future is to burn the books. They don't put out fires anymore. They start fires. And if your neighbor knows that you have books, they can report you, and the firemen will come and burn your books, and sometimes your whole house down. This was one of those classics that I always wanted to check off my list, and I'm glad I did, but I found the writing style very hard to get into, and it was kind of boring. And, it's just one of those social commentary books that kind of, I feel like it's kind of relatable no matter what time period you're in. So I felt like it was still kind of relevant even in today's society, but it wasn't one of those books that you enjoyed reading. The next one that I finished was another audiobook called No Exit by Taylor Adams. I used this for the prompt of author name starts with A, and I really liked this book. It was a really good thriller, had great tension in it, and I really enjoyed listening to it. It really it kept me intrigued. It follows a girl named Darby who is on her way home from college to see her mother because she's sick with cancer and she needs to get there quickly because she's not doing very well. And she's driving through a snowstorm. And on the way there, the snowstorm gets so bad that she has to stop over at this rest area, and all the roads are closed, and so she gets stuck there. And there's a couple of other people already there, and it's like blizzard conditions outside, and she's not prepared for it. And while she's there, she discovers there's a vehicle outside that has a child in it, and there's only a couple of people in this rest area, so she's like, who does this vehicle belong to? Why is there a child in there? And then the story goes from there. You wouldn't think that a story set entirely at a rest area in a snowstorm would be that good, but the author did a really good job of keeping the tension high and keeping the story moving, and it was really good. I found myself waiting for the next time that I had time to listen to it. The only complaint that I had about it was that the ending kind of went on just a tiny bit too long. I I think it could have ended a little bit sooner and just been perfect. But overall, I gave it 4 stars, and I really, really liked it. The next one was another audiobook. It was Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. I doubled up on this prompt, or this book, for the adoption related prompt and the prompt involving friends. And I think most people kind of know what Tom Sawyer is about. It's about a boy named Tom Sawyer. He lives with his aunt, and he's just a typical boy, causes mischief and goes on adventures, and I liked it. I'm glad that I finally got around to checking this one off as well. I have tried to read this book several times in the past, but had a hard time getting into the writing style just because the way it was written, Mark Twain wrote it like as the way people spoke, and I kind of had a hard time getting into that. But the audiobook was really good. So if you've ever tried to read it and couldn't really get into it, try the audiobook. It was a lot easier to follow and get into. And I gave it 4 stars. And then the last one that I finished was Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fannie Flagg. This was the prompt food related because of fried green tomatoes. I loved this book. This is an excellent book. I think most people have probably heard of it. If you've never read the book, you've probably seen the movie. But they're very different. The movie kind of just takes like little bits and pieces from the book, but there's so much more about the characters in the book. It just goes a little bit deeper. But it follows a woman named Evelyn, she's gone to this nursing home with her husband to visit her mother-in-law. And her mother-in-law is not very nice. So she ends up going and sitting in the waiting room, and she meets this other older lady. I can't think of her name. I think they call her Ninny. I think that's what her nickname is. Miss Threadgood. That's what it is. She meets Mrs. Threadgood, and Miss Threadgood is just a talker. And she just starts talking to Evelyn and telling her about all the people that she knew in this little town of Whistle Stop in Alabama, and about Idgie and Ruth, and what happened in this little town. Just all these little stories. It's great Southern storytelling, if you like that kind of thing. And it's like, Miss Threadgood, she starts to tell Evelyn about this one particular story involving Idgie and Ruth, but then she has to go all the way back to the beginning and explain everybody's life story, and just all the stories about everybody who lived in this little town, and the cafe, and all the events, and it was really, really good. And you got a little bit more about Evelyn, who was played by Kathy Bates in the movie. So you get a little bit more about her character in the book than I felt like you did in the movie. She's kind of going through this life crisis where she's dealing with a marriage that isn't particularly happy. And, her children are older and don't need her. And she's got all these feelings and thoughts. And so she ends up, developing this friendship with Ms. Threadgood during these visits. And then I think she starts to just go and visit her on her own, like just to see her and hear the stories about, Idgie and Ruth and Buddy and all the people who lived there. So it was really good. I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars, and I don't give 5 stars very easily, but this one was just, in my opinion, it was just perfect. I loved it. That's it. Those are all the books that I got through in the month of November. I thought it was another great reading month. I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.